these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths. We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Today we're going to talk about something called ESG, what Elon Musk recently called the devil incarnate. So what is ESG and why is it the devil incarnate? Now, there's more people interested in investing in a clear energy portfolio, and there's more tools nowadays that allow shareholders and the public to track clean energy investment. And there's been a shift from traditional oil and gas into renewable energy. So you would think it's fine if companies being held accountable to their shareholders and saying what they would like their companies to get involved in is a good thing, right? Well, here's the problem. Activist investors have taken oil companies hostage. Exxon, Chevron, BP, all of these companies are largely controlled by big Wall Street and private equity firms like BlackRock. These activist investors include climate activists, people like Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, who really don't like the oil and gas industry, and they want to drive investments away from fossil fuels and toward solar and wind. ESG means environmental, social, and governance investing. It's a trend. It's kind of like a culture in the finance industry, and it's threatening to destroy the American energy industry, including the natural gas industry, which is the latest target of ESG and radical activist investors. And the reason this doesn't make any sense is because they've, frankly, got the wrong target. Because in just 6 years, U.S. LNG has reduced global emissions more than any other green project in the world. Natural gas is the reason we've led the world in emissions reductions. If you care about the environment, you want more U.S. natural gas, not less. So here to talk about that today is Toby Rice. Toby Rice was named President and Chief Executive Officer and joined EQT's Board of Directors in July 2019. He served as a partner at Rice Investment Group, a multi-strategy fund investing in all verticals of the oil and gas sector since 2018. So look, Rice or EQT is number one producer of LNG in the United States. He's put together a really interesting presentation with a lot of facts, a lot of data. It really makes the case that I've made many times on this podcast, which is if you export more natural gas throughout the world, you displace coal. And when you displace coal, you have a much bigger impact on emissions than any other green project that you can possibly imagine. And oh, by the way, you also get reliable energy that people can actually use. So let's talk to Toby about that. All right. So, Toby, I want to you give this presentation a lot, unleashing U.S. LNG, the largest green initiative on the planet. Why is it a green initiative? I thought natural gas was a fossil fuel and it's evil.
Yeah, well, we made this deck to actually bring to light the true power of natural gas in decarbonizing the energy that we use. You know, calling natural gas just another fossil fuel is like calling a Tesla another car. Mm-hmm. You know, natural gas is the Tesla of the power sector. And when we think about some of the challenges that we face in energy right now, specifically producing natural gas, it's a great thing. And when you give people access to cheap, reliable, clean energy, quality of lives skyrocket. And families are fed, jobs are created. When you don't have access to energy, you see what happens in the world right now, specifically in Europe, when people don't have their energy security. So that's our mission, is to put more energy into the world. But what we found is the thing that was preventing us from putting more energy into the world was the environmental pushback and saying natural gas is a fossil fuel. Fossil fuels are bad. It's causing emissions. And so we stepped back and looked at the energy transition as a whole and said, well, you know what, let's stop fighting this thing and let's actually look at this problem and see if we can provide a solution. Mm-hmm. And the energy transition is something that's very confusing to a lot of people. There's a lot of moving parts. But when you look at it objectively, you realize what is the biggest issue as it relates to climate and emissions. And the biggest source of emissions around the world is foreign coal to create electricity. Mm-hmm. Now, fortunately, the United States has a tool to combat this, and that's in the form of using natural gas to replace that foreign coal. And so,
well, what's the carbon footprint compared, just for the audience?
Yeah, it's real simple
compared to coal.
Yeah, it's real simple. Every BCF a day that we can put into the world will retire about 30 million tons of CO2 equivalent per year.
Okay.
So it's pretty impactful. That would be equivalent to electrifying over 6 million vehicles.
One of the stats I've heard, maybe it's the same you've heard, U.S. natural gas is about a third of the emissions of Chinese coal, maybe half the emissions of U.S. coal. Is that about right? So it's significantly less.
Yeah, in this deck here, it's actually about 60% less emissions when you use natural gas compared to coal.
Yeah,
and
so that adds up.
Coincidentally, it's about the same environmental reduction you get when moving from a gasoline-powered car to an electric vehicle. It's about a 60% reduction in emissions, which is really funny when you think about it, because everybody loves electric vehicles, and that is a great solution that everybody embraces. 60% reduction in emissions. Well, you compare that to natural gas replacing coal, same amount of emissions. One solution, electric vehicles, is publicly applauded, and another solution, natural gas replacing coal, is shunned. And so we want to take a very objective approach at looking at this fallacy that's out there and actually quantify how big could natural gas replacing coal be around the world. Is the reason why the United States is on track to meet our climate emissions, why we are the leader in the world.
And there's some, and throughout this, like, it's a long presentation, but I want to actually go through it and sort of take out the good nuggets of information that people need when they want to make the argument to their neighbors. I mean, that's kind of the goal of the podcast oftentimes is I want you to have the right arguments. I want you to learn something every time you listen to this, not just talking points. And I mean, and you start out, there's so many good facts in here. So on page 3, you actually note, I mean, this is a little bragging, okay, just bragging about your company. I got it, EQT. But like you guys have lower emissions than average U.S. producers. And then it shows Russia and Iran as far as, because, and this gets to a fundamental question. Why should the United States be the energy producer of the world, and there's different answers to that question. Some people might say, well, because it's good for our economy and jobs, and that's obvious. But, there's a lot of people who say, who cares about the economy and jobs if we're all going to die, right? Because climate change now, okay, we're not all going to die. That's not true. But, people are still concerned, okay? So forget the alarmists because they're crazy. But the people who are just concerned about it, this makes the argument to them, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think people look at oil and gas as just a normal commodity. But we look at natural gas and energy as a whole, as a product. And what are the criteria of this product? What makes energy different? We think it needs to be cheap, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be clean. Yeah. And why we should produce energy in America, it's because we produce the cheapest, most reliable, cleanest form of energy. And this slide here points out exactly how clean this energy is compared to other places around the world. Is
foreign coal kind of I view it as the low-hanging fruit, right? Because, transitioning to solar and wind is exceptionally difficult. I don't think it's nearly as beneficial, frankly, as many people think. I think there's other environmental costs to it that they just don't take into account, like land usage and rare earth mineral usage. Disposal of these large wind turbines is extremely difficult. So anyway, this isn't a wind and solar bashing session. I love it. It's great, but just, should it really be subsidized the way it is? I don't know. But is foreign coal really low-hanging fruit? So there's a lot of it. What does it account for as far as global emissions? Is that in here?
It's over half the global emissions in the world comes from coal. So when you want to think about low-hanging fruit, think about the biggest fruit. It'd be like a watermelon hanging. That's the size of a pickup truck hanging from the tree. It's a massive.
And it's a good analogy too, because a watermelon's easy to shoot down because it's a big target, right? And so, and what do we need to do to actually displace coal?
It's real simple. Leverage our resources here that we have in the United States. We're blessed with American shale and a tremendous natural gas resource. We need to be able to produce this natural gas and liquefy it and send it offshore, so that we can send it to these countries that don't have access to natural gas. And so just to quantify this opportunity, what can we do in the United States? And this is the punchline of the whole deck. We believe that we have the resource in the United States to increase production and quadruple our LNG exports over 50 BCF a day from where we're at today. And by doing that,
how long would that take if Biden was like, I love you guys all of a sudden? Like, how long would that take?
Less than 10 years.
Really?
And keep in mind, the United States went from 0 LNG exports in 2016.
Yeah.
In less than 6 years, we became the world leader in LNG exports. So, and that's without a big rally cry.
Right.
That's without a full embracing of the environmental benefits. That's just us meeting the market conditions.
Yeah.
We can move a whole lot faster and think we can do a lot more. But just to quantify, that's a lot. And we say this is the biggest green initiative on the planet. How can we say that? It's because the environmental impact that we'll get, is going to be equivalent to electrifying every vehicle in the United States, putting solar on every household in America, and also have the environmental equivalent of putting 54,000 industrial scale windmills. That's double the U.S. wind capacity. And it's so big, it could do the equivalent of all 3 of those green mainstream initiatives combined. It's absolutely massive. It's over 1.5 billion tons of CO2 equivalent shaved per year.
The mere act of quadrupling gas exports gives you all those benefits.
Yeah, and what's amazing is we've already done this before. We're not talking about adding new technology, new innovation. Right. It's just doing the things that we've already done before. The challenge is we just need to build pipelines and LNG facilities faster than we've ever done it before. And hence, the desire for having political support and leaders, promoting this plan.
And like throughout this, especially in the beginning, because you realize your audience, right? I mean, you gotta sell this to environmentalists. Republicans like me love these kind of briefings, but we already agree with you. So but what I like about this is, you talk about the goal of the 1.5 degree limitation on warming, and where that goal came from is a whole other discussion. That's kind of a bit of let's call it awkward soft science. In any case, that's the goal everybody adheres to. Mm-hmm. And like you make a good argument as far as, look, if we keep talk about this, if we keep with this idealistic, almost naive pathway / solution of renewables only pathway, it's counterproductive. Why is it counterproductive?
That's exactly it. People should look at this, environmentalists would look at this and say, if you care about the environment, you should want to unleash U.S. LNG because it's the biggest green initiative on the planet. But we will have some people that will oppose it. And why will they? Is because exactly what you mentioned, the keep it in the ground mentality really means that people will only consider solutions that are zero carbon solutions, like solar and wind. Now,
here's not nuclear for some odd reason. They really don't like nuclear.
And here's the challenge. Here's the problem with that zero carbon solution only mentality is we're getting our butts kicked by foreign coal. Now, people misunderestimate how much energy usage is needed in this world. And when people don't have access to clean energy sources like natural gas, they're going to use coal. And when solar and wind can't keep up, they're going to use coal. So think about this. In the last 12 months, coal use around the world has increased our emissions by 500 million tons. Okay, so we're increasing our emissions. That is equivalent to wiping out all of the benefits that we've achieved here in the United States with solar and wind. In the last 15 years, we've been wiped out in the last 12 months. So clearly, coal is a heavyweight issue, and you need a heavyweight solution that's scalable, that's sustainable, and that's profitable. And that is U.S. LNG, and that's another reason why we're so excited about this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, what's the counter argument that you get? Again, because you don't need to convince me. This is an argument I make all the time. And my answer to my own question is it's a belief, right? It's a belief that you just have to know. It just has to be this way. Like we just have to do this thing because I worship these deities and their solar and wind power. What about nuclear? Oh, nuclear is dirty too. That's not dirty. It's great. But anyway, they don't like it. And so it feels very emotional. And it seems like we depart from a rational conversation rather quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first section in this deck really talks about the issue that's at hand, why we're going backwards when it comes to our emissions goals, because the zero carbon solutions are not enough to retire the foreign coal. Foreign coal is the only thing we need to be concerned about. Time matters. And then when you think about the the carbon budget that people will say we have this much carbon budget left, and then the world's going to flip upside down. Speed matters. And so it's not going to be, when you think about the scale it would take to put the amount of solar and wind to replace what we can do with LNG, it's going to take trillions of dollars. It's going to take decades and decades to get it done. One of the great things about this plan, though, and the other thing I'd say is, you look at where this foreign coal is coming from. It's not coming from the United States, Dan. Yeah. 91% of coal burned in this world is foreign coal. That's why we talk about foreign coal. And you look at on where this coal is being burned, it's coming from majority Asia, China and India. And then you look at the per capita GDP, and you say 70% of coal use is happening in China and India, where per capita is 10,000 per person and 2,000 per person. How are they going to afford solar and wind when the cheapest, most cost-effective thing they can do, the most impactful thing they can do, is replace coal with gas, and get your cheap, reliable, clean energy, and then you can think about working in some of the zero carbon solutions.
So one argument you're hearing recently is over and over again from the Democrat Party is, look, this supply problem with oil and gas around the world, that's just further proof that this transition is more, it's more urgent than ever. What do you say to that?
I'd say if you believe it's urgent, then you can look at the progress that we've made with a zero carbon solution only, and emissions are going up. Coal emissions around the world is going up. So, like I said, we need to change the philosophy a little bit and say, instead of having a zero carbon solution only mentality, we need to have any decarbonization opportunity mentality. And that means, natural gas, even though it is a fossil fuel, it is the biggest decarbonizing solution that we have, and we need to put our heavyweight solution on the field.
I mean, I think that's a key point. I want to point out a couple of key things. It's the one scalable, cleaner solution we have that doesn't require serious government intervention. It just requires the government to stop screwing with it. Now, if the people making that argument that this is just further proof that the urgency is all that much more severe, if they were making it about nuclear energy, I'd take them more seriously, right? Because that's a more quantifiable investment. You need this amount of money to build this nuclear plant, and it creates this much energy all the time for this cost. Okay, we can quantify that and decide if we really felt like our lives were on the line. But they don't say that. Right? They go to solar and wind, which is inherently unreliable. That's the thing everybody forgets. Like, even if it got cheaper, and it's usually just cheaper because of government subsidies, even if it got that way, it still doesn't turn on all the time. I gotta laugh. I'm like, I can guarantee you the sun's going down every day. And if the sun doesn't go down one day, we got real big problems, like solar system problems. Right. That's not so. It's going to happen every day. The wind will stop blowing at some point. The UK, Scotland in particular, are dealing with this quite a bit because it's just not as many windy days as they thought there would be. So that reliability thing is really something to hammer home too.
Absolutely, and this is a key part. I mean, energy needs to be cheap, reliable, and clean. And while solar and wind can claim to be cheap and clean, they lack the reliability. And when you look at energy and all three of those criteria, natural gas is the cheapest, most reliable, cleanest form. It's the best balance of all three. So we don't have to sacrifice our energy security and our reliability, and we can still achieve the clean benefits. But one of the biggest things that we hear from this plan is, well, it's not zero carbon. Well, okay, if you can't get past we need to put every decarbonizing solution on the field. Let me tell you this: if we can unleash U.S. LNG, this is going to have a tremendous environmental impact, replacing coal, international coal with U.S. natural gas. That's step one. Replacing coal with gas is step one. There's another transition that will take place, because with natural gas, we can decarbonize natural gas, whether by converting it into blue hydrogen and ammonia, or leveraging carbon capture technologies. So we know these technologies exist. We actually know what it costs today. Our question now is, can we bring the cost down for something that actually makes sense. Now, I will tell you right now, blue hydrogen, it's about $20 per million BTU, okay? So that'd be equivalent to $20 for natural gas. Natural gas is currently trading around almost $6 here in the U.S. But you can, and I say, wow, that's too expensive. Well, in Europe right now, they're paying over $35. So guess what?
Sucks to be.
$20 hydrogen, a zero carbon solution, could actually make sense in the future. Now we're gonna.
Can you scientifically kind of explain what blue hydrogen is, how we make it? Like what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's real simple. A natural gas molecule is five atoms, 1 carbon and 4 hydrogen.
I knew that, of course.
Yeah. So there's a number of different ways that you can actually pull the hydrogens and strip the hydrogens off of the carbon.
Yeah.
The most common way is steam methane reformation. And basically what you're left with is hydrogen as the output and gaseous CO2. Mm-hmm. You take the gaseous CO2 and you use it, you inject it underground. That's how you store it. Now, one of the great pieces of technology that's coming out when it comes to hydrogen, something that everybody's really excited about, is a piece of technology that uses a process called pyrolysis, that the output, natural gas goes in, the output is pure hydrogen and solid carbon, which guess what? That makes
You can store it easier.
Makes its storage so much easier. Now, I think that technology is 3 to 5 years out, but here's the race that we're at right now, okay? We are in energy. If you're in energy, I don't care if you're drilling oil and gas wells or if you're doing solar or wind or any other flavor of energy. We are in a race to create cheap, reliable, zero carbon energy. Mm-hmm. Whoever figures that out is going to solve.
And if you were a betting man, you think this blue hydrogen idea is maybe
I'm going to bet
it's something.
Yeah, because here's the race right now. Oil and gas industry, we're natural gas. We are cheap, reliable. We need to figure out zero. Mm-hmm. We're starting with clean, going to get zero. Wind and solar are cheap and zero, but they need to figure out the reliability. So for them to get to all three, they need to figure out batteries. How's that going to influence the cost? They need to figure out their supply chains. They need to figure out all of the disposal, all of these things. Mm-hmm. Natural gas, we need to figure out how to make blue hydrogen cheaper and how to go to zero. Now, I'm going to bet on this industry, the natural gas industry. Why? Because we've done amazing things before. We've got some of the brightest minds in the world. We've got better technology than NASA. We're fracking with jet engines right now. We've gone and taken a situation, where we found ourselves, 20 years ago saying, peak oil, we're running out of energy. What did we do? We innovated and figured out how to get blood from stone, not literally, but how to make commercial economic volumes of oil and natural gas out of shale, which has less permeability than concrete. I mean, think about that. We've completely changed the energy landscape. And not only did we bring energy independence back to the United States, which people said was impossible, we did that. We're also a powerhouse energy producer. So when you say who's going to win this race, it's because of our track record that I'm going to bet and say that the natural gas industry is going to be cheap, reliable, zero carbon. That's who I would bet on. But listen, the point is we should support all energy forms and let them know, listen, let's get a race going, but let's not hold back people. Let's not challenge people and prevent them from doing the great work that they do by blocking pipeline infrastructure or other infrastructure that we need to move forward as a society.
And you think the demand is out there again, if our government got out of the way, and let's say, had like a 6-month permitting policy, where we're going to make a decision within, let's assume some really nice things like that. Is the demand around the world sufficient? Will China buy our LNG? I think India probably would, but would China? So talk to me about the business environment globally on that.
Yeah, let me pull you super high level. Right now, natural gas demand is around 375 BCF a day, okay? IHS, very credible, Daniel Yergin, his shop is forecasting natural gas demand to grow 40 BCF a day by 2030, okay, over the next 10 years. In addition to that, so we need more natural gas in the world. And to put this in perspective, the United States, just call it, produces around 100 BCF a day, okay? In addition to that 40 BCF a day of increased natural gas demand that we have organically, for people to meet their climate ambitions, there's about 175 BCF a day of coal that's being burned that we could replace with 175 BCF a day with gas. Now, so when you look at that, it's about 200 BCF a day of natural gas incremental to what we're doing today. And that would allow us to meet the energy needs of the world and also meet the climate ambitions that would come from eliminating or reducing the dependency on foreign coal. Now, our plan is massive and it's huge, and it would require us to increase our production here in the United States by 50% to 50 BCF a day. But when you compare it to the big picture, there clearly needs to be other forms of energy to meet the needs of what's going on in the world. And I say that not to make anybody feel sad about, hey, we don't have enough energy. We have tremendous amounts of energy. But I say that so that it puts in perspective when people are blocking energy development here in the United States, step back and look big picture. Yeah. And this world clearly needs these resources.
Right. Energy demand will increase by every metric I've heard 50% and by 2050. Yeah. That's usually the number. That's right. I fall back on. And so it seems obvious from just a human well-being standpoint, you need an all of the above strategy. Again, like I know it kind of sounds sometimes like against wind and solar. I'm really not. I just don't think you should overinvest in it to the detriment of other energy sources. I mean, we learned that lesson real hard in Texas. We're like number one with wind. People don't realize that, like, oh, just a bunch of oil and gas. No, man, we got so much wind power in Texas, and it's fine. I'm not against it, but should it be subsidized 250 times more than nuclear, per unit of energy? And the answer is I really don't get why it should, because we talk about, okay, how do you fix the reliability problem? Well, just make batteries. Well, how many batteries? And look, the physics of energy capacity, there's a limitation to that. Even I've talked to some smart people on this. Theoretically, maybe you could do a little bit better, but that's just in theory. In practice, it's very difficult to meet that. So I don't think you'll ever get there. I think it makes a lot more sense for kind of individual usage. Maybe, in California, you have solar panels in your house. I get it. Have a Tesla battery in your garage. I get it. I can kind of see how you as an individual might make that decision. Now, you're probably a little bit better off than I am, and I'm not sure why my tax dollars are subsidizing your decision, but, whatever. Let's move past that. That's just, can we, unless you want to react to anything I just said, I was just sort of rambling, but I want to move on to like ESG and some other options.
Yeah, listen, I would say this. I think you bring up a lot of great questions about, renewables and how we finance that. But, our approach with this deck really here, and this is one of the things I think that really resonates, is everything that we're talking about here is going to be additive to whatever the United States decides to do. One of the things that's really important for people to understand, and I don't want to disappoint people by saying this, but with all the great things that we're doing here in the past, if we don't address foreign coal, they will be futile. I think it's very simple. We can get into debates on batteries and wind and solar, but to make it simple, the only thing that matters if you care about the environment is retiring and lowering our dependence on foreign coal.
Well, it's just like, look, people need to imagine, and I like trying to come up with good arguments that work with people. Look, if your boat is flooding and you have a teacup and you have a 5-gallon bucket, you can choose either one to start bailing water out of the boat. Which one do you choose? Mm-hmm. You choose the freaking bucket, Yeah. And if your life is on the line, which alarmists claim that it is, then you choose the bucket. But the bucket has, it's covered in fossil fuels, and it feels icky to them, and they don't want to use it. They want to use the teacup because it's nice. That just seems to me to be what's going on here. So this podcast will be released next week, which means as you, dear listener, are listening to this, last week on the Energy and Commerce Committee, we had the oil and gas executives in front of us, and Democrats dragged them in front to ridicule them and accuse them of price gouging. So at the time of this recording, just to be clear, we have not had that hearing yet, so I have no reactions from it. I will be on it tomorrow. What do you think of this accusation? It's been on the news all day too. I mean, Fox is really covering this a lot. That like, here are the counter arguments to that. I mean, you're from the industry. What do you say about this price gouging accusation?
Yeah, it's incredibly disappointing to hear that. Obviously, oil and natural gas, global commodities, they're set by the laws of supply and demand, and the prices are where those equations shake out. And I think that when you look at, I mean, we've been challenged. We've had letters sent to us from senators accusing us of price gouging. A senator from Massachusetts sent me a letter and said,
"Really, it's Massachusetts? They're so reasonable. Those senators over there, Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren, the most reasonable senators in this." No,
Dan, I grew up in Massachusetts. So,
yeah, from South Boston. I was going to say, as I heard you, oil and gas guy. I mean, if your Texas accents is it just doesn't. It's not ringing.
Yeah, can you believe it? Not every oil and gas well drilled in the United States is in Texas. Actually, Pennsylvania is the biggest gas field in the world. But
whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, who says? Honestly, we don't know that.
It's absolutely massive.
We don't know that.
Yeah,
for sure. Texas might still have a bigger one.
Yeah,
we just haven't found it yet.
Yeah. So listen, I mean, just back to this. I mean, I think you look at why are prices high. It's very simple. When you look at natural gas in particular, not only is having low cost resource like the Marcellus Shale important, we need the infrastructure to get it to market. And we talked about the reason why natural gas prices were so high in New England. And to put this in perspective, January 31st, when we got the second letter complaining about gas prices, gas prices in New England were $30 per MCF. I mean, it's what people are paying in Europe right now. This is crisis stuff. And when you look back and you say,
what do you think that what does that mean for like a monthly heating bill? Because I don't know what, most people don't know what 30 MCF means. I mean,
Dan, it's completely unnecessary, and that's the thing that really makes me upset as an energy producer, that people are artificially paying higher prices. Why? Because there's been over 7 BCF a day of pipeline projects canceled that would have connected the low-cost Marcellus supply. So put it in perspective, we're selling our gas for $3.50 in Pennsylvania, and literally 200 miles away, their residents are paying over $20.
And so what causes that price hike for New England in particular? And I'll give my own little personal anecdote here, because I went to school in Boston too. I went to Tufts, and me and my roommates lived in this crappy old house our senior year. And I'll never forget, we had a heating bill that was like $800, because we kept it at a 70 degrees. And after that, we were just done. We were like, this is just going to be cold, and we're all going to wear jackets inside, and that's just how it's going to be. And it was nuts. And that was 2006, 2005, 2006.
Yeah, and I think I think the attitude is when you stop infrastructure and you put policies in place that prevent people from having energy freedom and allowing them to choose the energy that they want, you're not shutting off their demand for energy. They're going to get it however they feel. And I think you look at what's happening around the world, whether it's grabbing more coal and increasing our emissions,
or they need to burn,
or it's people bidding up the price of natural gas that's artificially scarce in Massachusetts. And it's very simple. It's lack of pipeline infrastructure.
They just don't want to build pipelines.
Yeah, the response is real simple. If you want access to cheap energy, we've got the cheapest natural gas prices in the country in Appalachia. Build a pipeline to Pennsylvania. We'll fill it up with $3.50 gas. But you got to build the pipeline to make that happen and lower energy costs for your residents. And this is something that hits home for me, because not only are we talking about getting more gas, but like residents in the United States, in New England, they burn oil in their basement. Over 30% of the people in New England burn oil to heat their homes. Like, that's my mom. Like, literally, the house I grew up in, we burnt oil. I mean, there's so many better solutions out there, like clean burning natural gas. Not only is it better for the environment, it costs about 1/6 of the price, because natural gas is cheaper compared to oil. And not only that, I mean, you'd think that's crazy.
Is that
enough.
just the old way of doing things? These houses were just set up that way. I don't even know the history of this.
There's a number of reasons, but I mean, listen, the pushback against natural gas development and the banning of natural gas hookups for new buildings, these are happening in places like New England. And they act like they don't need natural gas, but they're burning oil in their basement. And what's even more remarkable is they're not only just burning oil in their basements, they're burning oil in New England, ISO, the power grid.
Yeah.
Over 25% of their electricity was generated with oil. Now, that is what happens when you run out of access to natural gas. So clearly there's a need for more natural gas. Why aren't we allowed to build more pipelines up there? Why are these opposed? I think it's because people have an attitude like, we don't need hydrocarbons. Clearly you do. And clearly we need to make this more accessible. And not only to people in the United States, but for people around the world. We just need more infrastructure and support to do that and get away from energy is bad. Energy is great. It's life-giving. And we need to celebrate that. And when we do that, it's going to allow us to do the biggest green initiative on the planet and meet major climate issues that people have.
Yeah. So wait, but just, I don't mean to like ping on this too much, but is the oil burning a consequence of the scarcity of the gas, or is it just a legacy thing?
No, it's a consequence when you don't have
it's
enough.
New. Okay. So
well, it's something that has been going on for a long time, and it's something that's not like surprising. I mean, there's people out there looking and saying, you don't have enough natural gas, and you're going to have to rely on backups, and those backups typically are coal. Well, guess what? You shut down all the coal plants, you can't do that. So they have these backup oil burners, and this isn't just unique to New England.
Yeah.
And you look at what's happened.
We just don't have like backup heaters in Texas, so I'm trying to figure. I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to visualize what we're talking about a little bit.
Yeah, and what's remarkable is New England gets their natural gas, a decent amount of their natural gas from LNG. It's the only place in the country where we import LNG, which is remarkable to think that gas is coming from South America, half a world away, when literally 2 states over, we've got the biggest natural gas deposit in the field. These are the type of, crazy things that's got people scratching their heads.
Russian LNG in particular.
And a little bit of Russian LNG.
That's always a talking point. I was actually going to ask about that. Like kind of tell us the truth about how much, was there like a specific time period that Massachusetts was getting a ton of Russian LNG? And I think everybody kind of points to that.
Yeah, this is public data. You can actually look to see where the source of gas is. And most of it is coming from Trinidad and Tobago. I think the Russian point that there may have been a cargo a while back and people took it and ran with it. But listen, regardless of where the gas comes from, it's not coming from America. And America is the cheapest, most reliable form of energy. Why are we going anywhere else?
And cleanest,
Yeah. So, listen, there's a lot of these head scratcher situations that are taking place, not just in New England, but all across the country. And I think this is a signal that we need to do more in our industry to educate the public. This deck is a start. This is not the end game. This is a start of the conversation, because there's a lot of these. There's so much more opportunity here in the United States.
Right. Let's move on to ESG. A conversation about that. So ESG is environmental, society, governance, investing. It's like a cultural trend, really, in the investing world. I mean, I'm not sure how else to describe it. It's how environmentalists.
Dan, it's a lifestyle.
It's yeah. I mean, it kind of seems that way. According to Elon Musk, it is, what does he call it? The devil incarnate. Why would Elon Musk say that? I mean, he's like a solar guy. He's an electric car guy, but he's calling ESG out as the devil incarnate. And like we do all the time. Again, like you don't have to convince me. It's the environmentalist way of changing it from the inside out. No more like not even attacking it with policy, but with inside out financial investments.
Yeah. So ESG, I think ultimately the goal, the output of ESG is to produce more profitable businesses in the long term. But when people talk about ESG, they only really talk about the environmental aspects of a business. I think anytime you lose balance, then you're probably going to get unintended consequences. And we can look at as an example in Europe. What did they do specifically? I'll talk about energy because that's what I know the most. Because of their prioritization on just the environmental aspects of their businesses, they retired coal plants. They replaced them with solar and wind. They retired their nuclear. So basically stripping out reliable power sources and replacing them with intermittent sources. Great for their environmental score on paper. But now look at what's happening. The social impacts of war. When you give up your energy security, bad things happen. First off, on society, skyrocketing energy prices, completely unnecessary, skyrocketing. We saw that. That was phase one. Phase two was economy shutting down, manufacturing shutting down. We saw that happen. And we saw down manufacturing shut down in Europe. They stopped making fertilizer because natural gas prices got too high. Well, guess what the ripple effects of that? High fertilizer prices. And high fertilizer prices means food issues. Yep. This is exactly what we're talking about 2 months later. Today, we're talking about fertilizer prices going through the roof.
Well, they think in silos. They don't think in the whole picture.
We got to think big picture. We got to think balanced, big picture. And then the third thing is, when it gets so bad, energy insecurity gets to a point, you see military conflict. And it's what we're seeing right now with Russia exerting their influence to, and creating war. And so, is there all this investing that people have done? If it's not done in a balanced approach, I think you're going to get unintended consequences. So for us, we embrace the root of what ESG is. It's the spirit of making things more profitable. And for us, that means we want to make our energy cheaper, cleaner, more reliable. That's all we think about all day long. And in addition to that, you think about all of the people that you touch. Yeah. And so we're not just thinking about our shareholders, we're thinking about all stakeholders. And I think if you take a simple approach like that, I think you're going to be more likely hitting the target on the ultimate intention, which is generating more profitable companies. But, we've seen some negative aspects of prioritizing just one element of the
and let's back up a second, because I'm not sure everybody listening still doesn't really understand what ESG is. It's because it's not a policy, although the Biden administration is trying to get the SEC to basically formalize it as a policy. I want to ask you what the impact of that will be. But as it stands currently, exactly what is it? So investors basically have a scorecard of how a company scores on environmental standards. And then the next question is, how have they been so successful in infiltrating and taking stakes and control over energy companies? Exxon being kind of the most recent interesting example of that. And then you see Conoco fighting back. So why is that so different?
Yeah, so ESG, okay, there's the three main categories: environmental, social, and governance. And to measure that for a company, there are a number of metrics. So for EQT, we manage and track over 400 specific unique metrics across the board. And majority of them are on the environmental stuff, but things like diversity, inclusion, those would show up in your S. Employee care, that would be an S. And then the governance side would be...
We hired a transgender bunny rabbit last month. We are good on diversity. Sorry, that was bad, but you can't help but laugh sometimes at this. Go ahead.
And the governance side is making sure that your shareholders have have good rights. Now, we are big believers in ESG. I mean, I'm in this position as CEO of EQT because of governance. We ran a proxy contest after we sold our business to EQT in 2017. That's when, Rice and EQT coming together created America's largest natural gas producer. Things didn't go well after a year. And, unfortunately, we had to run a proxy contest. And that is a takeover. To get control of the company, we elected over 7 directors to the board. And I will tell you, that experience going through that, I have a lot of respect for politicians. Anybody that has to go through a campaign, that was probably the closest thing I ever got to a campaign. It was personal and there was a lot of attacks. It was the worst experience of my life. It was not fun. So I have a lot of respect for you guys stepping up and being leaders and putting yourself through that. But I have a unique perspective. I mean, we did this and took over EQT as a relatively small company in the grand sense of things. To think about what's taken place at Exxon, where they've captured multiple board seats at a huge company, I think is just a sign that a lot of the environmental activism that's taking place, it's real and it's real.
Money.
Dan, it's
And
real
sophisticated.
It's real sophisticated.
Like to really bring things down to some basic levels. How do you take over a board seat?
Okay, very simple. You have a proxy card that you file, and say who you'd like to recommend for your directors, and then all the shareholders vote for who they want the directors to be in the company. It's that simple.
And bigger shareholders have bigger votes.
That's right.
So if you look like BlackRock is kind of the one that everybody's pointing to recently.
Yeah,
because they're very big on ESG and they're huge, the biggest investor, institutional investor. So. Does this only affect public companies? How do private companies fare in this environment?
Well, public companies are where you see the most influence. But listen, the principles of ESG, the metrics that people look at, they're followed by public and private. Private is more voluntary, but we're seeing a lot of privates, especially in energy, adopt really robust ESG metrics tracking, performance enhancements.
Like you are. And that was one of my questions is, like, who is those metrics for? Are there you have investors that demand it?
Yeah, they're for all stakeholders, not just our shareholders. But every year we'll put our performance across those 400 metrics, and you'll see our performance and how it trends. Now, obviously, not every one of those 400 metrics is as impactful as the next. So, I mean, for us in the energy industry, the most impactful environmental metrics really have to do with our air emissions. Is really the big thing that people focus on. And so, then you get a scorecard, and that will show you how you rank against different public companies. And, it's one of the things that people will look at as they're making their investment decisions. I mean, this is real. And the good news is this was something I think that was a new topic for energy. Maybe 3 to 5 years ago, to be defined in this format and structure. You'll never see an industry that cares more about the safety and protection of the environment than energy companies. Okay, that's something that's ingrained in our culture: safety and taking care of the environment. Formalizing into a new framework and process, and having putting ESG reports together, and it was almost like a big report. That's been new, but it's incredibly encouraging to see how energy has embraced this, and because at the end of the day, this is all about transparency, and this industry has always been transparent. It's because our operations, they're in the public. We're not in some private warehouse. We're out there in people's communities where people can see what we're doing. I think we take it a little bit more seriously in the oil and gas industry because of that nature of our business.
Does some of the CSG activism is this what leads to less exploration, less drilling? I mean, are there investors that are like, no, don't do that, invest in this? I mean, is that happening with some companies? What's your lay of the land?
Yeah,
here?
absolutely. I think you look at why do we have an energy shortage around the world? It's very simple. It's an underinvestment in traditional energy production. Right. And that investment is drilling natural gas wells, drilling oil wells. I mean, these are major projects that can take years to do.
Right. So it needed to start years ago, and it didn't. ESG's been around for a while, so ESG has something to do with that. It's really a perfect storm, isn't it? Because, I mean, it's the height of ESG activism. COVID destroyed a lot of production. A lot went under, and it takes time to get those back. Biden took office, so people are like, well, geez, I think they're talking about a methane tax. They're talking about this regulation. Now, they haven't been very successful in implementing a lot of this, but the threat is there. So it's like, well, why don't I wait on that investment? Why don't I wait on that land lease? Well, they're not leasing anything anyway. But why don't I wait? And even if it's private land, I'm going to wait because I'm not sure that I'm going to get that permit. All of this stuff combines to create this production problem, right?
Yeah, political signals is really important. We need these investments that we're making. I mean, we're talking about millions, billions of dollars. We want to make sure that our investment is going to be there and not going to get taken away, or have federal lands all of a sudden say no more production on federal lands, or have regulations that would put our operations uneconomic. Like, to give you an example, the methane fee is one. Methane is the hydraulic fracturing of today. It's people's biggest concern from an environmental perspective, and that's fine. we're gonna knock methane emissions out of the park, just like what we did with hydraulic fracturing.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. I mean, I see this graph, and it's from the Russians, and it says that LNG methane intensity from U.S. LNG is like 10 times Russia's.
Yeah, but I mean, you know,
I'm just messing with it. So they really did publish this, though. It just kind of goes to show Russian misinformation is rampant in the environmentalism space.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you think about Russia, you think about where's their biggest source of power coming from? Okay, it's energy exports, and they have one of the biggest resources of natural gas in the world, rivaled only by the United States. And if you want to preserve
Texas,
and Texas is a very big, important producing state.
No, come on, it's very political of you.
But yeah, I mean, you look at what's one thing that's going to hinder Russia's influence and power. It's U.S. shale. Mm-hmm. And listen, this is tinfoil hat type stuff, but you know, you should not be surprised to think that Russia would carve off, you know, $1 billion of the $500 billion they make in energy exports per year, and put it for some advocacy against shutting down.
It's not tinfoil hat at all. We have plenty of proof.
Yeah,
I mean, I have stacks of documents. I mean, and everybody knows it. I mean, the ODNI has talked about this. Hillary Clinton talked about this. I mean, this is everybody knows this is happening. Mm-hmm. It's not tinfoil hat at all. It's very much true. Back to ESG for a second. Okay, so I mean, what are producers supposed to do? How is there a way to fight back successfully against these investors? And also, what other business considerations are there in the industry? Just kind of the ups and downs, the business cycle, as well as this is a more profit-oriented problem from investors where they're demanding dividends constantly as well.
Yeah. So let me talk about how the mentality has changed in energy, and then I'll talk about, you know, how do we deal with this moving forward. So ESG mentality is something that's ingrained in energy producers now. It is. Yeah. And that's
because they feel like they have to.
Well, what's ingrained is the drive to be profitable. And what that means is no longer will the industry just chase short-term price signals and respond with activity. That has been the mentality for decades, and unfortunately that mentality has resulted in tremendous number of bankruptcies. It's a very unsustainable business approach, just responding to short-term price signals. But how have we changed? We've changed because what we will respond to is long-term demand signals, okay? If there's long-term demand for our product, you will see this industry step up and deliver in demand, like how we delivered in making America the world leader in oil and natural gas production, giving energy independence to America. We will step up. This plan to unleash U.S. LNG, 50 BCF a day, the LNG facilities, the pipelines, getting those built, the long-term contracts, that's long-term demand. This industry has the desire and ability to step up and meet that. And that's a profitable mentality that is a benefit from
like you're asking for money. You're not asking for just permission.
Right. And so it comes to the fact, like, well, how do we continue to be successful here? How do we deal in a new world where ESG mentality is more than just, it's not just about the dollars and cents. It's about caring for stakeholders, making good for the world. We got to communicate a little bit different. You know, before, energy was all about how cheap can you make it? How reliable can you be? Well, now there's a new dimension to energy, and that is people care about clean energy. And so I think we need to change the way we talk about it. And guess what? You know, this deck is a perfect example of talking about our business a little bit differently. If you care about the environment, you should care about U.S. LNG because it is the biggest green initiative on the planet. But I will tell you this, if all we do as industry is just talk about how much we lower our emissions, which is a good thing, by the way. EQT will be net zero by 2025. So this industry can do significant things to reduce our emissions, reduce our carbon footprint. But if all we do is talk about how we're just lowering emissions, there's going to be people in this world that are going to say, I don't care if you have 100 tons of emissions, you still have emissions and I want to cancel you. So what we need to do as industry is talk about the great things that we do, like our product is going to lower emissions around the world. Our product is going to eliminate energy poverty in China, India. It's going to provide security to our allies. We start, and if you want to cancel the oil and gas industry, you're canceling all these great things. You're canceling all these great opportunities. We don't talk about the fact that this industry provides a significant amount of dollars in the form of royalties. One of the best things about our industry is our success is shared with the mineral owners. At EQT alone, in the last 24 months, we've paid out over $1.1 billion. This is during the calendar years of 2020 and 2021, during the years of the pandemic. Wow. Put over $1.1 billion into the hands of our landowners. That's life-sustaining. That's community-sustaining. So we need to, how many people are talking about how many royalties they're paying? None. We need to start talking about these positive things, because when you want to cancel oil and gas, you're canceling modern society. You're canceling all the good things that we do. And I think what people need to understand is when you attack oil and gas, you're attacking our customers. It's that simple. When you attack a business, you're attacking the business's customers. And oil and gas is something where everybody is a customer. Even the people that are jumping up and down saying we need to stop it, they're draped in our products.
Yeah, they have no idea.
And that's a really important thing. I hope that people understand that, everybody uses our products, and when you attack oil and gas, you're attacking our customers. We need to think about ways that we can support energy, because it's supporting families and all the customers, and that's hundreds of millions of Americans around the country.
Do you see a point where these ESG standards start to take into account the arguments you're making here? Because we've made them ad nauseum throughout this conversation. And again, going back to the big bucket versus the small teacup, trying to bail out the water. Shouldn't you get a higher score with that argument? It's an irrefutable argument.
Yeah.
So how?
Well, and what's funny is there's a lot of these good metrics are already being reported on. So when I talk about communicating, it's not just having the metrics out there. It's actually elevating those to a level that's equivalent to the environmental impacts that we have and the good things we're doing there. It's just more talking, more communicating about it. I think that's a really important part.
It would be good too, for argumentation's sake. I'm sure the numbers are here. We just have to kind of formulate them correctly. But say, like, for every, for every 10% increase in LNG exports, you get X decrease in carbon emissions globally. We could come up with a figure like that.
I know what the figure is. I'll tell you. Here's the numbers. Every BCF a day you put on the water is going to save 30 million tons of CO2 emissions. So every 10 BCF a day we put on the water is going to be about 300 million tons of carbon emissions. The full 50 BCF a day we put on the ground, it's going to be the equivalent of 1.5 billion tons.
1.5
That's
billion
electrifying every vehicle on the road, solar in every house, putting 54,000 windmills. Yeah. And you know what?
I just like percentages. It rolls off the tongue easier.
Yeah. So think about this. Real simple way to wrap your head around carbon emissions is it's about 35 billion tons a year, sort of what's out there. Okay. And
so 1.5 billion of that for every day, or every
year,
BCF,
every year. Okay. Yeah. And then you think about the United States in this. Is about 4.7 billion tons compared to the almost 29 billion, which is coming from other places around the world. So that's why, our plan, this plan is important. It's great for us to continue to reduce emissions domestically, but
it's a drop in the bucket.
We got to look. Yeah, exactly. It's the little thimble. The big bucket is foreign coal overseas. But
last question. The SEC is trying to really formalize these ESG standards. What do you think the impact of that would be?
Yeah, it depends on exactly what is they determine that they want to do. So I think it's too early for me to comment on that right now, but I think it's definitely something that we're tracking and keeping an eye on.
Cool. All right, I'll let you off the hook on that one. Again, I can say whatever I want. I mean, not whatever I want, but you guys are in a tough position, because I've noted, as I've noted a couple times here. you don't have a choice in some senses.
Yeah.
It's easy. Politicians and Republicans especially, we're always telling the industry, you got to stand up for yourselves.
Yeah.
But frankly, what I normally tell them is you got to create arguments like this,
Yeah.
like this presentation, and then you have to advertise it.
Mm-hmm.
You really got to market it. I tell the industry that all the time because people have no idea that they're wearing, petrochemical products. I mean, they don't understand that Patagonia and North Face love to virtue signal about how green they are, but everything they make is synthetic materials, which is a petroleum product.
Yeah.
People just don't know this stuff
Right.
oftentimes, and so just letting them know is helpful.
Well, let me give you this then. I'm going to come back to that. Okay. So on the SEC comments, one of the things that's out there is, the scope of emissions that we report. The very simple version of the scope. There's 3 different scopes of emissions. Scope 1 and 2 is the emissions that you create to create your product. Okay. The scope 3 is what are the emissions when your product is used. So to put this in perspective, EQT, America's largest natural gas producer, our scope 1 and 2 emissions are around 900, call it about 1 million tons of CO2 per year. Now, we're going to do things that are going to reduce that organically by replacing pneumatic devices, eliminating our methane emissions. We're going to end up with around 400,000 tons per year. But when you look at scope 3, what are the emissions of the product when people use it? Well, it's 120 million tons. Okay. And so what's tricky about whether the SEC wants to use scope 3 emissions
Right, I get it.
is because if you're the power plant and I give all my gas to you, well, your scope 1 and 2, what you use to make your power is going to be 120 million tons. Well,
I assume that's what they mean because that's how Democrats talk often.
Yeah, but so what I want to, and if we're going to talk about scope 3, then I want to talk about scope 4. And scope 4 is what are the emissions that are abated when people use your product? Because when people use our product, they're offsetting, about 50 million tons of CO2 emissions from coal. Right. So we spend 20 million of CO2 emissions with gas. We offset 50 million tons of CO2 from coal. That's how we get to that 30 for every BCF a day. And when you look at it like that, EQT's scope 4 carbon footprint, we are 6 BCF a day of natural gas at a 30 million ton per year clip. We are a negative 180 million ton per year company. Now, to put this in perspective, Tesla, okay, they put 1 million electric vehicles on the road. That's about 5 tons per car. So you're talking about 5 million tons. Yeah. Our carbon footprint is multiples, magnitudes higher than that. Why? Because we are decarbonizing the world by retiring coal. So you can go with unless people understand scope 1, 2, and 3, and I probably people that went over people's heads. I'm sorry for not being clear about it.
We have a very smart audience. You'll be fine.
It's very complicated for people, and when it's complicated, it's easy for people to think things are worse than they are. But like I just said, I can make an argument where our climate impact is significantly more than what Tesla's doing. So people, I think, need to get educated, and we need to make sure we have a framework that is easy to understand so that people don't overreact, or people actually understand where the true winners are in the situation. When you do that properly, you're going to see domestic oil and gas producers have a tremendous impact on the world, and we should be lifted up, not beaten down.
Yeah. Do things that actually do good, not just feel good. I think that's the moral of the story here. Toby, thanks for being on. Appreciate it. That was great.
All right. Thanks.